Commander Hyunwoo Kim stood on the bridge of the research ship New Seoul, watching the stars through the main window. He had been in space for 3 years now, exploring the outer edges of known galaxy. Humans had only learned to travel faster than light 20 years ago. They were still new to the big galaxy, still learning about the other races that lived among the stars. Dr. So Young Park walked up to him, holding a data pad in her hands. Her face looked worried. "Commander, we got a message from Earth. It's marked urgent." Hyunwoo took the pad and read the message. His face went pale. The message was from Admiral Taemin Cho, head of all human space forces. It said that first contact with a new alien race had gone very wrong. The aliens called themselves Vulcans. They looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. They were bigger and stronger than humans, with sharp teeth and claws. But that was not the scary part. The scary part was what they believed about themselves. The Vulcans thought they were the best race in the galaxy. They called themselves the Alpha race. They had conquered almost 1,000 star systems. Every other race they met became their slaves or died fighting them. They had never lost a war. The Vulcans had found 3 human colonies: New Busan, Port Incheon, and Haven's Rest. These were small farming worlds with maybe 50,000 people each. The colonists were peaceful people who just wanted to grow food and raise families. Captain Jin-Ho Lee's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All crew to stations. We just got orders to join the defense fleet at New Busan. The Vulcans are coming." Hyunwoo and So Young hurried to the meeting room. Other ship captains appeared on screens around the room. Captain Jin-Ho Lee stood at the front, his face serious. "The Vulcans sent us a message," Jin-Ho said. "They call us a beta- species. They say we are only good for working as slaves. They gave us 7 days to give up all our colonies or they will kill everyone." The room was quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. Humans had never fought a real war in space. The Vulcans had been fighting wars for hundreds of years. So Young spoke up. "I studied their message broadcasts. The Vulcans rate every species by something they call the Alpha Index. It measures how strong you are, how much territory you control, and how good you are at fighting. They put themselves at the top, of course." "What do they rate us?" asked another captain. "They say we are weak because we have only 23 colonies. They say we are cowards because we run away from fights instead of attacking first. They think we are stupid because we try to talk instead of fight." Hyunwoo shook his head. "They don't understand us at all." "No," Jin-Ho agreed. "And maybe that's good for us." The meeting ended and everyone prepared for what was coming. Hyunwoo went back to his quarters and called his wife on Earth. Her name was Haewon and she worked as a teacher. They talked for an hour about normal things: her students, his research, the weather on Earth. Neither of them talked about the war that was coming. 3 days later, the Vulcan war leader Crexus made another broadcast. This one went to every human world and ship. Crexus was enormous, even for a Vulcan. His scales were dark red and his eyes were yellow like fire. "Humans," Crexus said, his voice deep and rough, "you have not answered our demand. This shows you are even more stupid than we thought. We will show you what happens to beta species who do not know their place." The broadcast showed Vulcan ships. There were hundreds of them, each one the size of a human city. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had armor that could stop any human weapon. At least that's what the Vulcans thought. "In 2 days we will attack your colony called New Busan," Crexus continued. "We will kill everyone there slowly so the rest of your species can watch and learn. Then we will come for your other colonies one by one. In the end, the survivors will thank us for teaching them to serve the Alpha race." The broadcast ended. Across human space, people were terrified. Many wanted to surrender. They said it was better to be slaves than to be dead. But not everyone agreed. Admiral Taemin Cho sent a message to all human military forces. "The Vulcans think they know what humans are like. They think we are weak. They think we are cowards. They think we will give up without a fight. Let's show them how wrong they are." Hyunwoo stood with his crew as they prepared for battle. Dr. So Young Park had been studying everything they knew about Vulcan technology and biology. "They are stronger than us," she said. "But they always fight the same way. They attack straight ahead with all their power. They never change their plans once they start fighting." "What does that mean for us?" asked Jin-Ho. "It means they don't expect us to do anything surprising. They think all races fight like they do." The human defense fleet reached New Busan just hours before the Vulcans arrived. There were only 30 human ships against more than 200 Vulcan vessels. The colonists on New Busan sent messages to their families. Many thought they would die. Then the Velkan fleet appeared. Their ships were massive and dark, covered in weapons. Crexus himself was leading the attack from his flagship, a ship called Alpha Domination. Crexus sent one last message to the humans. Surrender now and we will kill you quickly. Fight us and we will make your deaths last for days. Captain Jinho Lee answered back. We have a message for you too. Humans don't surrender. Humans adapt. The first space battle between humans and Velkans was about to begin. The Velkans expected an easy victory. They had always won before. They thought this time would be no different. They were about to learn that humans were not like any species they had ever fought. Admiral Taemin Cho sat in the emergency meeting room on Earth. Around the table were the leaders of all human colonies and military forces. The Velkan threat had brought them all together for the first time in years. We need to try talking to them, said Ambassador Donghyun Ryu. He was Earth's best diplomat, a man who had prevented 3 wars between human colonies. Maybe we can find a peaceful solution. Dr. Moon Seo-yang, a scientist who studied alien behavior, shook her head. I've been watching their broadcasts. The Velkans don't think like us. They only understand strength and weakness. To them, trying to talk is the same as admitting you're weak. But we have to try, Donghyun insisted. If there's even a small chance we can avoid war, we should take it. Admiral Taemin agreed. Go. Take a small ship and a team of diplomats, but be careful. These aliens are not like anything we've dealt with before. Lieutenant Colonel Sujin Kang was preparing her Special Forces team on New Busan. She knew the Izai-Dar, Velkans were coming, and she knew the regular military might not be enough. Her soldiers were trained for impossible missions, for fighting when everything went wrong. Listen up, she told her team. The Velkans think they know how this will go. They think they'll land. We'll line up in neat rows, and they'll cut us down. That's how they've always fought their wars. Her second-in-command, Major Hyun-Ki Nam, raised his hand. What if we don't fight their way? Exactly, Sujin smiled. We're going to show them something new. Meanwhile, Ambassador Donghyun Ryu and his team arrived at the Velkan border fortress called Zarian Prime. It was a massive space station, bigger than most human cities. Velkan ships surrounded it like angry wasps around their nest. Donghyun sent a message requesting permission to dock. He followed all the proper diplomatic rules. He came in a small, unarmed ship. He brought gifts and messages of peace. The Velkans let them dock. But when Donghyun and his team walked into the station, they knew something was wrong. Hundreds of Velkan warriors surrounded them. These aliens were even bigger up close, and their yellow eyes showed no kindness. War Chief Crexus himself came to meet them. He looked down at the small humans and laughed. So the beta species sends us mice to squeak for mercy. We come in peace, Donghyun said, keeping his voice calm. We want to discuss the situation between our peoples. There is nothing to discuss, Crexus replied. You surrender or you die. Choose now. We choose to talk, Donghyun said. Surely the great Velkan Empire can find a place for a peaceful species like humanity. We could trade with you, share knowledge, maybe even help you with your other enemies. Crexus laughed again, but this time it was an angry sound. Help us? You think the Alpha race needs help from weaklings? You think we want your friendship? The war chief grabbed Donghyun by the throat and lifted him off the ground. The ambassador struggled, but Crexus was too strong. Let me show you what the Alpha race thinks of your peace. What happened next was recorded by the station's cameras and broadcast across human space. The Velkans killed Donghyun and his entire team slowly and brutally. They wanted every human to see it. They wanted everyone to know what happened to those who dared to think they could talk to the Alpha race as equals. Back on Earth, Admiral Taemin watched the broadcast with his officers. His face was stone, but his hands were shaking with anger. Dr. Moon Seo-yang had tears in her eyes. They didn't even listen, they just killed them. Now we know, the Admiral said quietly. There will be no peace, no surrender, no mercy. The Velkans want a war, and they're going to get one. At the same time, Dr. So-young Park was studying everything humans had learned about the Velkans. She worked day and night trying to find any weakness they could use. Their society is based on physical dominance, she explained to Captain Jin-Ho Lee. The strongest Velkin leads, and everyone else follows. They've never had to deal with anyone who could match their strength and think differently at the same time. What do you mean? Jin-Ho asked. Every species they've conquered was either weaker than them or fought the same way they do. They've never faced an enemy that could adapt and change tactics during a battle. The first Velkin attack on New Busan began exactly as everyone expected. Hundreds of Velkin ships dropped thousands of warriors onto the planet's surface. The aliens expected the humans to meet them in open battle, army against army. Instead, Lieutenant Colonel Su Jin Kang had spread her forces across the entire planet. When the Velkins landed, they found empty fields and silent cities. Then the attacks began. Human soldiers hit the Velkins from every direction. They used the forests and mountains to hide. They attacked supply lines and communication centers. When the Velkins charged in one direction, the humans disappeared and attacked somewhere else. The Velkins had never fought an enemy like this. Their warriors were brave and strong, but they were confused. Their leaders gave orders, but the battle kept changing too fast for the orders to matter. In space, Captain Jin-Ho Lee was fighting his own battle. The human ships were smaller and weaker than the Velkin vessels, but they moved faster and worked together better. When the Velkins expected them to retreat, they attacked. When the Velkins expected them to attack, they vanished into asteroid fields and nebulae. Dr. So Young Park's research had given the humans one big advantage. The Velkins always fought the same way because that way had always worked. But humans had learned to change, to adapt, to try new things when the old ways failed. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Velkins had lost more than half their ships and most of their ground forces. The survivors retreated in confusion and anger. War Chief Crexus could not believe what had happened. No one had ever defeated the Velkins before. No beta species had ever hurt the Alpha race so badly. But the humans had done more than just win a battle. They had done something the Velkins thought was impossible. They had shown that the Alpha race could be beaten. Across Velkin space, other conquered species heard about the human victory. For the first time in centuries, some of them began to hope that maybe the Velkins were not unbeatable after all. The news of the defeat at New Busan spread through the Velkin Empire like fire. For 800 years, the Velkins had never lost a battle. Now a species they called Beta- had destroyed 60% of a Velkin attack force. War Chief Crexus stood before Emperor Velthak in the great throne room on the Velkin homeworld. The Emperor was the largest Velkin anyone had ever seen, with black scales that seemed to absorb light. His yellow eyes burned with rage. "Explain to me," the Emperor said, his voice like thunder, "how the mighty Velkin Empire was defeated by a handful of weak mammals." Crexus kept his head down. In Velkin society, failure meant death. The humans fought strangely, my Emperor. They did not meet us in honorable battle. They hid and struck from shadows like cowards. "Cowards do not destroy Velkin fleets," Velthak replied. "Tell me the truth. They adapted, my lord. Every time we changed our attack, they changed their defense. Every time we thought we understood their plan, they did something different." The Emperor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Then we will show them that adaptability means nothing against true power. Take 10 times the force you used before. Crush their colony at Port Incheon. Leave no survivors. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Wu Jin-nam was studying the battle reports from New Busan. He was humanity's best military strategist, a man who could see patterns where others saw only chaos. The Velkins learned nothing from their defeat," he told Admiral Taemin Cho. "They think they lost because they didn't use enough force. They don't understand that force wasn't the problem." "What was the problem?" the Admiral asked. "They think in straight lines. Attack, retreat, victory, defeat. They can't imagine a battle that changes shape while it's happening." Engineer Hansol Jeon was working on new weapons for the human fleet. She had studied the recordings of Velkin ships and found something interesting. "Their shields are very strong," she explained to Captain Jin-Ho Lee. "But they never change frequency. They assume their enemies will keep using the same weapons throughout a battle. So if we could change our weapons during the fight," Jin-Ho began. "Exactly. We could design missiles that learn and adapt while they're flying toward the target." Commander Yejin Lim was training the human fleet in new tactics. Instead of fighting like Earth navies with each ship acting alone, she taught them to work together like a school of fish or a flock of birds. The Velkans see each ship as a separate warrior, she explained. They can't imagine ships working together so closely that they act like one big organism. When Crexus arrived at Port Incheon with his massive fleet, he expected the humans to be afraid. He had brought over 2,000 ships, enough to destroy a dozen human colonies. Surely the humans would surrender when they saw such power. Instead, the human defense fleet was waiting for them. Captain Jinho Lee commanded only 200 ships, but they moved together in ways the Velkans had never seen before. The battle began with the Velkans doing exactly what they had always done. They formed their traditional battle lines and charged straight at the human fleet. Their plan was simple: use their superior firepower to destroy the humans quickly, but the humans didn't fight back the way the Velkans expected. Instead of meeting the charge head-on, the human ships spread out like water. Some went high, some went low, some went around the sides. The Velkans found themselves shooting at empty space while human ships attacked them from every direction. Engineer Hansol Jeon's adaptive missiles were the biggest surprise. The first wave of human missiles struck the Velkan shields and bounced off, just as expected. But while they were bouncing off, they were also learning. The second wave adjusted their frequency. The third wave found gaps in the shield patterns. By the fourth wave, the missiles were passing through Velkan shields like they weren't there. Impossible, Crexus roared from his command ship. No weapon can adapt that quickly. His communications officer looked confused. Sir, their missiles are changing even after we fire them. How can they do that? The answer was that humans had learned to build weapons that could think. Each missile shared information with all the others. When one learned something new, they all learned it instantly. But the real shock came when the Velkans tried to regroup. Every time they formed a new battle line, the humans had already moved to counter it. It was like fighting an enemy who could see the future. Commander Yejin Lim was coordinating the fleet's movements from her command ship. She watched the Velkan formation changes and smiled. They're still thinking like ground warriors, she told her officers. They want to line up and charge. They can't understand three-dimensional thinking. The battle lasted only 6 hours. When it was over, the Velkans had lost 80% of their fleet. Crexus escaped with barely 200 ships out of the 2,000 he had brought. The defeat at Port Incheon was even worse than New Busan. This time, the humans hadn't just defended successfully. They had completely outfought a vastly superior force using tactics the Velkans couldn't understand. On the Velkan homeworld, Emperor Velthak received the news in silence. Around him, his advisors whispered among themselves. Some began to say things that had never been said before in Velkan history. They began to question whether the Velkans really were the Alpha race. Perhaps, said one old advisor carefully, we should study these humans more before attacking again. Velthak's eyes blazed. Study them? The Alpha race does not study inferior species. We destroy them. But privately, the Emperor was beginning to worry. The humans had now defeated the Velkans twice, each time more decisively than the last. Worse, they seemed to be getting better at fighting Velkans while the Velkans were not getting better at fighting humans. On Earth, Dr. So-Young Park was analyzing captured Velkan equipment and prisoner interviews. She had discovered something important about Velkan psychology. They can't change, she told the military leaders. Not because they won't, but because they can't. Their entire society is built on the idea that there is one right way to do everything, the Velkan way. When that way stops working, they don't adapt. They just try harder. General Wu Jin Nam nodded. That's their weakness. They're trapped by their own success. They've won so many times by being stronger and more aggressive that they can't imagine any other way to fight. So what do? Asked Admiral Taemin Cho. We keep being human, Wu Jin replied. We keep adapting, keep learning, keep changing. Every time they think they understand us, we become something new. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. The Velkans were no longer fighting weak prey animals. They were fighting an enemy that learned from every battle, that grew stronger with each defeat they inflicted on their opponents. For the first time in their history, the self-proclaimed Alpha race was facing an enemy that might actually be better at survival than they were. The Velkan Empire was falling apart from the inside. 2 massive defeats by humans had shaken the foundation of everything they believed. On dozens of worlds, conquered species whispered about the humans who had beaten the unbeatable Alpha race. Emperor Velthak called an emergency meeting of all war chiefs. The great throne room filled with the largest and most powerful Velkans in the galaxy, but for the first time in their history, these warriors looked uncertain. "The humans have made us look weak," Velthak announced. "Every species we rule is watching to see what we do next. If we cannot defeat these mammals, our empire will collapse." War Chief Crexus, still bitter from his defeats, stepped forward. "Give me the entire war fleet, my emperor. 10,000 ships, 1,000,000 warriors. I will turn their worlds to dust." "No," said an old war chief named Gorthak. "We need to understand how they fight. We need to study their tactics and find a way to counter them." Crexus snarled. "Study? We are the Alpha race. We do not study prey animals. These prey animals have destroyed 4,000 of our ships," Gorthak replied quietly. "Perhaps it is time to learn something new." The Emperor raised his hand for silence. "I will lead the final attack myself. We will use every ship, every warrior, every weapon in our empire. The humans will face the full might of the Alpha race." Meanwhile, humans were preparing for what they knew would be the biggest battle of the war. Colonel Kyung-Ho Bae, head of human intelligence, had been studying Velkan communications. "They're mobilizing everything," he reported to Admiral Tae-min Cho. "Over 10,000 ships, maybe 15 million warriors. It's their entire military." Dr. Ariam Song, who had been studying Velkan biology, made an important discovery. "I've found something interesting about how their brains work. Velkans think in rigid patterns. When something unexpected happens, it takes them much longer than humans to process it and react." "How much longer?" asked General Wu Jin Nam. "Maybe 3 to 5 seconds. It doesn't sound like much, but in a battle, 5 seconds is forever." This gave the humans an idea. Captain Sung Min-oh, who led special infiltration teams, proposed something that had never been tried before. "What if we don't just adapt during battles? What if we make the battles themselves constantly change?" He explained his plan. Instead of fighting one big battle, the humans would create dozens of small battles happening at the same time. Every few minutes, the situation would change completely. The Velkans would never have time to understand what was happening before everything changed again. "We call it chaos doctrine," Sungmin said. "We make the battle so confusing and fast-changing that their rigid thinking becomes a weakness instead of a strength." The human defense was centered on Haven's Rest, the most important human colony after Earth. Admiral Tae-min Cho had gathered every human ship and soldier. But unlike the Velkans, the humans didn't just prepare for one kind of battle. They prepared for 100 different battles. Dr. A. Rayam Song's team had developed something special, a virus that could temporarily disrupt Velkan neural pathways. It wouldn't kill them, but it would make them confused and slow for several hours. Captain Sung Min-oh's infiltration teams had already spread this virus through Velkan supply lines. When Emperor Velthak arrived at Haven's Rest with his massive fleet, he expected to see the humans cowering behind their defenses. Instead, he found something that made no sense to his Velkan mind. The human fleet was scattered across the entire star system. Some ships were hiding behind planets, others were drifting in asteroid fields, and still others were moving in patterns that seemed random. There was no battle line, no formation, no plan that Velthak could understand. "What are they doing?" he asked his advisors. "Where is their fleet?" "We detect human ships everywhere, my emperor," replied his sensor operator. "They seem to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time." Velthak decided to use the traditional Velkan strategy. He would divide his fleet into groups and attack every human position at once. With his overwhelming numbers, he could destroy them all. But the moment his fleet began to move, the battle began to change. Human ships that had seemed scattered suddenly came together in perfect coordination. They attacked one Velkan group with overwhelming force, destroyed it quickly, then scattered again before the other Velkan groups could help. "Impossible," Velthak roared. "How did they coordinate that attack?" There was no communication between their ships. His communications officer looked confused. "There was communication, my emperor, but it was so fast and so brief that we couldn't intercept it. How can they plan complex attacks in seconds?" The answer was that humans had learned to think together. Years of practice had taught human ship captains to work like parts of one big mind. They could coordinate complex attacks with just a few words or even simple hand signals. As the battle continued, things got worse for the Velkans. Every time they thought they understood what the humans were doing, everything changed. Ships that had been fighting as a group suddenly split up and joined other groups. Defensive positions became attack formations. Retreating ships suddenly turned around and became ambush forces. The virus that Dr. A. Riemsong had created began to take effect. Vulcan warriors found themselves confused and slow to react. Orders from their commanders seemed unclear. Simple tasks became difficult. Captain Sung Min was coordinating the chaos from his command ship. He watched as Vulcan formations fell apart in confusion. They're trying to fight 100 different battles, he told his officers, but they can only think about one at a time. Emperor Velthak realized that his superior numbers meant nothing if he couldn't use them effectively. His fleet was being cut apart piece by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Retreat," he finally ordered. "All ships retreat to the outer system." But even the retreat became a disaster. The Vulcans tried to regroup in their traditional formations, but the humans didn't let them. Human ships harassed the retreating Vulcans, forcing them to keep moving, never letting them stop and reorganize. By the time the surviving Vulcans reached the edge of the star system, they had lost more than half their fleet. The mighty Vulcan war machine had been torn apart by an enemy that refused to fight the way wars were supposed to be fought. Velthak stared at the tactical display showing his broken fleet. Around him, his officers were silent. No one knew what to say. The Alpha race had been defeated again, this time by an enemy using tactics they couldn't even understand. "How?" the Emperor whispered. "How do they do it?" War Chief Crexus, wounded and bitter, gave the answer that no Vulcan wanted to hear. "They're better than us, my Emperor. They learn faster, adapt quicker, think differently. They're everything we claim to be, but better." For the first time in Vulcan history, their leader had no response. The Alpha race had met their match, and they were losing. On Haven's Rest, the humans celebrated their greatest victory yet. But Admiral Taemin Cho wasn't celebrating. He knew that a wounded predator was the most dangerous kind. The Vulcans would try one more attack, and it would be desperate and terrible. The war was about to enter its final and most dangerous phase. After the disaster at Haven's Rest, the Vulcan Empire was in chaos. Emperor Velthak had lost more than half of his entire military in a single battle. Conquered species across the galaxy began to rebel, sensing that the Alpha race was no longer unbeatable. But the humans did something that shocked every race in the galaxy. Instead of staying in their territory and celebrating their victory, they began to hunt the Vulcans. Fleet Admiral Ji-hun Park commanded the human offensive. He was a calm man who had studied every battle of the war. "The Vulcans are wounded," he told his captains. "But wounded animals are dangerous. We can't let them recover." The first human attack came at Theros Station, a major Vulcan supply depot. The Vulcans expected a normal assault, ships attacking the station's defenses until one side or the other was destroyed. Instead, the humans did something completely different. Commander Da-un Kim, who specialized in psychological warfare, broadcast a message to every Vulcan in the system. "Warriors of the Vulcan Empire," her voice said calmly. "You call yourselves Alpha, but what does Alpha really mean? An Alpha protects its pack. An Alpha ensures its species survives. An Alpha leads by example, not by fear." As she spoke, human ships surrounded the station but didn't attack. They just waited. "Look around you," Da-un continued. "Your Emperor sends you to die in hopeless battles while he hides in safety. Your war chiefs sacrifice your lives to protect their own pride. Is this Alpha behavior?" The psychological effect was devastating. For the first time in their lives, Vulcan warriors began to question their leaders. Some even began to question themselves. When the actual battle began, something unprecedented happened. Entire groups of Vulcan defenders simply stopped fighting. Some surrendered. Others just sat down and refused to continue. The station fell in hours with minimal casualties on both sides. General Hyo-jin Lee was coordinating the overall strategy from Earth. She watched the reports coming in from dozens of battles across Vulcan space. "It's working," she told Admiral Taemin Cho. "We're not just defeating them militarily. We're defeating their entire way of thinking." The humans had discovered something important about the Vulcans. Their society was so rigid, so dependent on the idea of absolute dominance, that once that idea was broken, everything else collapsed too. On the Vulcan homeworld, Emperor Velthak was receiving reports of defeat after defeat. But these weren't normal military defeats. Whole fleets were surrendering without fighting. Entire colonies were asking for human protection instead of Vulcan rule. They're not just beating us, War Chief Crexus reported. They're making our own people turn against us. How is that possible? The answer came from an unexpected source. A young Velkan scientist named Thekvar had been studying the human broadcasts. My Emperor, he said carefully, the humans are showing our people a different way to be strong. They demonstrate that true strength comes from cooperation, adaptation, and protection of the weak, not domination of them. Velthak's eyes blazed with fury. Lies, weakness. The strong rule the weak. That is the natural order. But my lord, Thekvar continued, look at the results. The humans are weaker individually, but stronger as a group. They lose battles but win wars. They protect their defeated enemies and turn them into allies, perhaps. Perhaps they understand strength better than we do. The Emperor struck down the young scientist for his words, but the damage was done. The idea had been spoken aloud in the throne room. Other Velkans heard it and began to think. Meanwhile, the human advance continued. But this wasn't a campaign of conquest. Every Velkan world that surrendered was treated well. The humans healed the wounded, fed the hungry, and freed the slaves that the Velkans had kept. Captain Sungmin Oh led the liberation of Kepler-7, a mining world where millions of alien slaves had worked in terrible conditions for centuries. When the human ships arrived, the Velkan overseers expected a battle. Instead, Sungmin broadcast a simple message. Any Velkan who lays down their weapons and helps us free the slaves will be pardoned and protected. Any Velkan who continues to harm the innocent will face justice. To everyone's amazement, most of the Velkan guards chose to help. They had seen what happened to other Velkan forces who fought the humans. But more than that, they had begun to understand that the human way of being strong was actually more powerful than the Velkan way. Dr. A. Riamsong was studying the psychological profiles of surrendering Velkans. They're not becoming weak, she reported. They're becoming different. They're learning to find strength in cooperation instead of domination. This was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all for Emperor Velthak. The humans weren't just defeating the Velkan Empire. They were converting it. They were showing Velkans a better way to live, and many Velkans were choosing that way. The final blow came when War Chief Gorthak, the oldest and most respected military leader after Crexus, sent a message to the human fleet. I am Gorthak of the Velkan Empire, the message said. I have fought in 1,000 battles and conquered 100 worlds. I believed in the Alpha Way for 3 centuries. But I have watched your people fight, and I have learned something. True Alphas don't just take what they want. They protect what they love. They build rather than destroy. They turn enemies into friends. Gorthak paused, and when he continued, his voice was different. I formally surrender my fleet to human command. Not because you have beaten us, but because you have shown us a better way to be strong. When this message was broadcast across Velkan space, the effect was like an earthquake. If Gorthak, the greatest Velkan warrior, could see the truth about human strength, then perhaps other Velkans could too. Emperor Velthak realized that he was losing more than a war. He was losing his entire civilization. The humans weren't just conquering Velkan territory. They were conquering Velkan hearts and minds. In desperation, he made a decision that would determine the fate of both species. Deep in the oldest Velkan archives were weapons that had been sealed away for millennia. Weapons so terrible that even the conquest-hungry Velkans had been afraid to use them. The world burners. Planet-killing devices that could destroy entire solar systems. If we cannot be Alpha, Velthak said to his remaining loyal followers, then no one can. We will show these humans and their new Velkan allies what happens when you challenge the natural order. His target was Earth itself. If he could destroy the human homeworld, perhaps the spell the humans had cast over his people would be broken. But Velthak had made a critical mistake. He thought like a Velkan, believing that destroying the enemy's strongest point would win the war. He didn't understand that humans were different. They didn't depend on one leader or one world. They were a network, not a hierarchy. The humans detected the world burner threat almost immediately, and their response would be swift, terrible, and final. The war was about to reach its conclusion, and only one species would survive to see the aftermath.